We're going to be talking about some of the current modalities that are out there for the people that are practicing on the field, AMS, the biomechanics assessment stuff, as well as the future modalities that can help reduce injuries by 2030. So, Julien, you want to take it away and introduce the panel here? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let the speakers to introduce themselves real quick. So, Shaun, you want to go ahead?
All right, Shaun Jayachandran. I'm with GameRun.ai. We develop individual athlete analysis profiles within 3 minutes after uploading an entire game tape. I'm on the product side, and we're also extending that with our research and development into injury and risk prevention.
Hello, my name is Nunez. I'm an ATC strength and conditioning coach, formerly with the head of trainer director sports medicine with the LA Lakers. Now I do VIP concierge with private clients, both athletes, celebrities, and young athletes.
I'm Josh Harris. I'm a former sports scientist for the University of Texas, but now a sports performance manager for a company called Myocene, where we measure force output for better decisions for return to play, fatigue management, and also optimizing training loads.
Hi everyone, my name is Stefan Valdes. I am a physical therapist, strength conditioning coach. I own a facility called Movement Lab here in Miami. I also work as a consultant on athletes' behalf, as well as with teams in the NBA as well. And then I have previous experience working with the NBA for the Detroit Pistons and the Oklahoma City Thunder previously.
My name is Devan McConnell. I'm the high performance director of the Utah Mammoth in the NHL. I lead the S&C, nutrition, and sports science departments with that group.
Well, thank you guys. So obviously this panel is about injury reduction, and I didn't call it injury prevention because there is no injury prevention basically. But the first question I'm going to ask you guys is, so today to try to reduce injuries, there's a lot of modalities, right? You can use biomechanic assessment, you can use tomography, you can use AMS platforms. So from your perspective, what has been one of the most effective ways to try to reduce injuries? So anybody wants to start?
Well, for me and within our organization, we're very, I guess, sports science heavy. We believe in data to help make more informed decisions. So when it comes to different technologies, force plates, wearables, the introduction of AI in different areas, I think what that's really helping us to do is, as I kind of said, make more informed decisions. I think one of the panels earlier, they talked a lot about the practitioner still having to ultimately make the decision. Data doesn't do that for you. For us, from an injury preventative or injury reduction standpoint, data allows us to have a better insight into each individual in our organization, what they're good at, what they're not good at, and then that helps lead us down the pathway, whether it's during a return to play scenario or on the front side, trying to keep players as healthy as possible. We have hopefully a better understanding of what they need and at what time.
Yeah, thank you, Devan. Yeah, go ahead.
So what I do on the consulting aspect is I utilize a UTC scanner to scan NBA athletes' patella and Achilles tendon. So what that allows us to do is just formulate a correct diagnosis. So that's first when it comes to like these athletes, as far as preventative aspect is, we can see if something's going to come about before it actually comes about, and it's much easier to manage it before it becomes an issue. So for us, correct diagnosis is like the most important as far as utilizing tech, and then utilize AI to simplify your life and to make things quicker as far as coming up with reports and data in order to be presentable on the coaching and the player level to develop that trust.
Cool. Before I get started, how many athletic trainers are in here? Raise your hand. Cool. How many strength and conditioning coaches? And then I guess how many PTs, physical therapists? So whenever we are all three of those, I would say scopes, right? We're all creating a story for our athletes and for our clientele, right? And echoing what Devan mentioned when it comes to, right, this data that we're collecting, we're utilizing multiple different platforms. We essentially take those data points that that person, that athlete is giving you, and we're creating the full story with the context of what we know of that athlete. From there, we can give informed decisions on things like, you know, hey, you might not be feeling a certain way, or something is currently going off or on the court or the field, or etc. But understanding those decisions and taking that as, I would say, a comprehensive overall story to make better, I would say, in-game and off-game or off-court decisions so that we can help prevent or help decline certain injuries, especially non-contact injuries in non-contact sports. And understanding that with utilizing, I would say, AI, and also utilizing different technologies, and just with your experience with your athletes as well is going to be very important.
I think one of the biggest issues is, we've talked about technology, we've talked about AI, we've talked about data-driven analysis, and utilizing it for injury prevention or injury reduction or anything of that sort. But I think one of the difficult parts is trying to determine which technology or device or modality to utilize within our athletes or our clients type of thing. I think that's one of the biggest issues that I encounter. I try to avoid a cookie-cutter program just because of force plate. I'm going to test everybody with the force plate type thing. Yes, it's great to have some data-driven in the part, but if an athlete requires something different, if they do more, they have a conservative tendonitis or Achilles tendonitis, then I'm going to do a different type of assessment, kind of ultrasound here, or like Stefan kind of mentioned. So I think it gets difficult when, like the whole saying that, you have a hammer, now all of a sudden everything appears like a nail, and you start kind of hammering on the part. And kind of being open-minded and having the understanding that, hey, yeah, just because I have a force plate doesn't mean I have to use it. Yes, I can use it, and it will help me and give me some guidance. It will provide me some information, but it shouldn't be the be-all for this athlete. It may be useful for this athlete, but now it may not be the priority thing for this other athlete type thing.
Yeah, that's great. Building on that too, for us, the idea is like a focus on integrated systems and context. So in developing our AI is looking at the entire game and the entire movement of an athlete, and not just like a specific situation or if they're in the office. We all recognize that athletes operate differently in different settings, and so having them in competition and looking at how their movement is, what their production is, decision making, all comes together. So for us, and the tools in the idea around injury reduction, it really has to play into the idea of what is going to be actually used and change behavior. We know tons of teams and tons of tech exists out there, and we also, I think all of you have witnessed teams that have not used it or made different decisions or ignored it because it's not part of the ethos. And secondly is how adaptable and accessible is it? We know that looking across the sports spectrum, a lot of you guys work with professional teams and athletes. For us, we also extend all the way down to the youth level, and so what's the access model? Do you have access to a $5,000 equipment? Do you have access to a $500 equipment? So how are we able to look and make this accessible across the board so our data sets exist in a much larger context so that every kid, every coach, every athlete has access and is able to, for us to analyze game film and be able to share back how we see their movement and what exists, instead of, hey, if you can afford a whoop ring, if you can afford X or Y, where the majority of families probably don't have access to that.
Yeah, no, good point. So my next question, you guys talk about all those types of modalities and how they're collecting data, right? So all those devices are collecting data, but how do you take that data and how does it influence, training, recovery, right? Can you guys give me some examples of how you use a particular set of data and you were able to adjust, like I said, training and recovery? We got to slow down with this guy, or he's about to get injured. How do you make those adjustments? Anybody has any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start this one. So the idea is kind of a combination, right, of reactive, proactive, and then having some analysis as well, and time for people to process as well as real time. So when we're looking at it, again, it's allowing people to make decisions in a snapshot and allowing people to make quick decisions that are going to help an athlete depending on the situation. Again, for us, we're producing these massive reports, and I think that we can see that across the board, that there are some data sets and analysis and reports that everybody gets that are pages and pages long, but we also need to be able to sync it down so that people are able to take a look at it, whether it's an infographic, a way of 2 lines that really help people understand the initial piece, give information, give input, because again, this has to be part of a larger solution. It can't be the data says this, so we completely trust it and we ignore the humans, or vice versa, where a human says it and ignores the other side of it.
Just kind of tag along with what he said on that part, is that at the end of the day, the data that we collect and we analyze is utilized to kind of validate what we're doing as far as whether it's rehab, whether it's strength and conditioning, or anything of that sort. If you, I was just talking to a gentleman over here earlier, Dean, if you have a strength program and you implement the program, you expect certain results with that athlete, and you use certain technology to kind of validate, hey, we're still on the right track, you're improving your numbers on that part, or your numbers are regressing, and then we have to find out, okay, why are these numbers regressing? Is it the program that's not accurate for you? Is it something else? Is it internal? Is it a mental thing? So I think at the end of the day, the data that we collect, whether it's force plays or whatever it is utilized just to either validate or allow us to determine, hey, we're on the right path, or no, we have to pivot and find out that there's something going on that part, or is the athlete regressing, and kind of pivot on the part and try to change the program on that part.
I agree, and to expand a little bit more on that as well, we've been, in injury reduction, we've been very, I would say, reactive when it comes to injuries, especially, from the level of like athletic training and sports performance, right? And in order to change that from going to reactive mode, almost this like preventive mode, we utilizing communication amongst all scopes, whether it's athletic trainer, right, the medical staff, or the performance staff as well within the facility or within the department is very critical, right? If you have, let's say, your strength conditioning coach is implementing one type of program throughout the year, and you have the athletic trainer is on kind of maybe a different wavelength or a different path, well, then there's no synchrony between the two, right? But if you're able to take that and have continuity, well, then that's going to help out, right? Help prevent, right? And go almost to this preventative mode rather than reactive mode. And that's also where that technology comes into play, right? Whether you are testing for fatigue management, utilizing multiple devices, or you take all of that together in an A&S system, and you're able to longitudinally break that out and read into that, right? The communication amongst all departments within the facility is very important, and have that continuity, because we're all playing a part of the game, right, for the athlete. Whether you're training an athlete, whether you are getting that athlete returned back to play, or whether you're helping that in some shape or form, it's very important to help to kind of change from a reactive mode to a proactive mode.
The data can also be utilized to help create athlete buy-in, which is huge. It needs to be something that you can explain to an athlete. Don't just trust me, let me show you how this is something that can help you. And then over time, you have the actual data points to provide that information. It's like you started from A, now you're at B because we implemented this type of program. So athlete buy-in is a huge factor, because you can have all the data points in the world, but if you don't have that athlete buy-in, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I'll just briefly add, I think what we're really talking about is the art of sports science, of combining all of this information. Everybody's basically said the data doesn't make the decision. It gives us more informed information, right? So we can make a more informed decision about what to do and how to collaborate and who's taking the lead within your department, et cetera. I think that the point of the data can help create buy-in is a huge piece of that, as well as having the athletes as part of that same ecosystem, keeping them at the center of it is crucial.
Yeah, and obviously we talk about the different modalities. They're not perfect, they have limitations. What I've heard from teams many times is, one, it doesn't fit the workflow, takes too much time for my guy to sit for like 10 minutes, it's just disrupt the workflow, right? Secondly, it's sometimes they have what they call alert fatigue. I was talking to a soccer team one time, and instead of using an AI system, they were flagging 12 guys on the field. The guy said, I gotta put a team on the field. I can't just check every single potential injury that's telling me, right? Or it's too expensive, for example, right? It's not backed by real science, there's no real studies behind it. So what are the gaps that you guys are seeing today that's with all those modalities?
I think fatigue of the user is a huge issue. In my setting in the National Hockey League and professional sports, as a practitioner, you have such a small window to catch the athlete's attention, be able to do something, and you only get so many bullets in the gun, so to speak, as far as what you can ask them to do with everything else that's going on day to day, and what the schedule looks like playing every other day for us. So I think one of the gaps or one of the challenges is always prioritizing what we think is really, really important, what's an absolute must touch on the athlete, and then working, again, communicating across departments within, with the athletes themselves. Why is this so important? Why am I asking you to do this? And if it's not, if I don't have that answer, or if it's level 2 on the priority list, it might be something that makes a lot of sense in theory, but just doesn't work in practice.
And maybe Devan, on that communication piece, I see teams sometimes, they don't even know that they have those types of technology. They don't communicate across departments, right? So when it comes time to do a tech audit, nobody knows they're actually using this, so they just get rid of it. So sometimes you'd be shocked that some teams are not talking across different departments, right? Which is just another issue too.
We all have one common issue.
Yeah.
We all have one common issue, which is time. So what is the thing that can get me the most time with an athlete? What is the thing that's going to get me the most effective dose that I want for that person? So for me, on the recovery side, obviously private practice, so I only have a certain amount of time with the client, so certain modalities that I'm trying to use are quick and to the point where it's going to get them the most benefit in the shortest amount of time.
And on that regard as well, with the communication piece, I'm sure UATs are going to have PTSD on this. Having to communicate that you have to sit or pull an athlete to the head coach is probably one of the most aggravating conversations that you have to have, right? So going back to the communication piece, right? Understanding those modalities and understanding the reasons why, right, we're doing what we're doing is very important. A great example of that is, for example, take the NBA. You have probably an 80-game season, right? An 80, 90-ish game season doesn't account for playoffs versus, let's say, the NFL where it's an 18-game season, right? If you're asking as a sports performance coach or as a sports scientist or athletic trainer to sit, your star receiver, right, for the NFL game to the head coach, probably is going to be like pulling teeth, right? As opposed to, let's say that you, right, as an NBA coach, like, hey, let's let him rest for a game, right? So we all have to deal with these conversations when it comes to sports performance, sports science, or athletic training in order to help that reduction. Really, that gap is a communication piece and understanding the technology and the reasons why we're doing it, right? It's a monetary thing to the owner, right, and to the management, but for us, we're more concerned about the player and the reasons why. And if we're able to manage that fatigue appropriately to where you can have them have a successful season and prevent injuries, then that's the ultimate goal, because at the end of the day, if we're winning games, we're making money, everybody's happy.
So Josh, on that standpoint, I know a company who basically built an injury reduction, injury prediction system using AI. So they said in about 18 months, we'll know before the injury happens, during game, if there's going to be an injury, which is great on paper, right? Mm-hmm. But to your point, if you go and talk with the head of performance for the Warriors, you're going to go to Steve Kerr, Steph Curry is about to get hurt, do you really think he's going to put him out the fourth quarter, game 7? I doubt it, right?
I highly doubt it as well. If you're to tell me I had to go to Robert Kraft to pull Tom Brady before Super Bowl, then I probably wouldn't be alive today. But again, that's the importance of our job, is having to communicate that piece, right? And understand the synchrony behind, right? The reason why we do what we do, when it comes from sports science, sports performance, athletic training, and then communicating that with the head coach. At the end of the day, the head coach is going to be concerned about X's and O's and about the game plan, about winning games. And the management's concerned about making money and upholding the franchise. But we're concerned about the player. And that's kind of the important thing that we all have to remember when it comes to, right, this piece of injury reduction and the gap.
Yeah, like he mentioned as far as and the data-driven on the part, and what Julien mentioned, if it's Game 7 in the NBA Finals and you're doing your data analysis, we do our force play test before the game or the night before, and you have an athlete that, your star athlete shows you that he's in the red and he's a high risk of injury, of course you're not going to sit him down for kind of Game 7. But at the end of the day, it's, the modalities that we utilize within our organization, I think it's oftentimes tough for organizations to take the time to analyze, see what's going to work for them and the needs for them. Just because it works for one team doesn't mean it's going to work for you, because if the Golden State Warriors have this technology there and they're benefiting and they've learned how to use it, doesn't mean it's going to benefit your team or your organization at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the examples you guys are making are such at a high level that it's super important, because there's a whole different ROI at stake there, right? Between media, corporations, ticket sales, and all that. I think one of the pieces is a lot of our data, and I think at that professional level, you want some professional individualism. But I think before that, we kind of also still live in a huge set of data silos at a youth level and at a college level even. So, you know, as people progress into those levels, nobody actually knows their real history, because there isn't, everybody's been kind of trying to hide it, or, you know, a competitive advantage even at like 10-year-old soccer. And I don't want to tell you what this guy's doing or what that, right? And so we don't have, and so we lose context of where a person might be getting hurt at 25 years old, but it might have started when they were 12, but there's no information that gathered and helped us make informed decisions. And I think that that context matters. And in that regard, it's kind of like the idea of like, by the time you feel you're thirsty, it's probably too late. You've already been needing water for a while. And I think that that's kind of one of those pieces again where I think at the professional level, we want that individualism, because you're trying, it's competitive, you're trying to win games, but below that, we see this with medical records across the board, right? It's almost impossible to get your record sent from one doctor to another, for them to make context decisions, and so, especially as people move, so we have to eliminate some of those data silos and trust that everybody's there for the best decision for the athlete at the levels before professional.
Yeah, no, good point. So now looking ahead by 2030, let's say, what do you think the future of injury reduction looks like? Is it, I remember David Stern many years ago was talking about the future of the NBA, saying, I want to be able, as a performance lead, to know when the guy's about to get dehydrated, when the guy's about to get an injury, muscle injury, right? Everybody talks about AI like it's the future, right? But again, with AI, there's imperfections, right? There's, you know, alert fatigue issues. Based on your experience, how do you see the future of injury reduction? What types of technology is going to happen? What kind of experience? How do you guys see the future?
Yeah, I think this is a crux we're at, and I love the idea that what you said, Julien, where it's the, people keep saying it's the future, but there's a lot of models that exist right now, and there's a lot of ways to use it. One of our research and development pieces is, and I showed it to Julien, was we ran a film from Cooper Flag from April of 2023. Anybody somehow doesn't know Cooper Flag, he was the #1 pick of the Dallas Mavericks this year. Awesome athlete, and we were able to produce, but I wanted to look back and see what it looked like as a 16-year-old agnostically, without our system actually knowing anything about him. So yes, we were able to produce a great report that made sense and kind of explained who he was, gave us some pro comparisons, but we also are doing research and diagnostics on biomechanics and what's his angle of bend and where his pieces. But what really stood out was we're playing with this idea of injury potential. And what we saw was, for him, ACL totally looks great, the way he moves, his biomechanics look fantastic. He's a basketball player, everything's probably going to say patella issues at some point, or patella tendonitis is going to potential. But the one that stuck out for me was, it actually spoke about him having the potential for ankle sprains and ankle injuries due to the way he lands in traffic. And if that, for me, who's a basketball head, that stuck out, because if you punch that into Google, that's exactly where Cooper Flag got hurt in March, playing at Duke, is that we were able to see in the context of a game how he lands versus just in isolated systems or practice. So it said the way he lands, because of the violence of how he jumps, he doesn't have a stable landing, and it increases the chance of ankle sprains and high ankle injuries. That's exactly what happened in March. And of course, last week we saw that when he had that highlight dunk coming down the lane and like basically fell over himself trying to land. So I think we're there on some of this AI pieces we're moving towards 2030. And again, it's how do we put all these pieces together and looking at the entire athlete and not just situational, because the other piece is we have a lot of data sets that talk about, and all of you referenced it, like this is what typically happens or what should, but it isn't personalized. And I think what we're going to see over the next few years is that ability to personalize, because we're going to gather individual data sets. And so what works for one person, it doesn't work for another. especially as we're looking at young athletes. Somebody might hit puberty 2 years ahead of another one. It doesn't mean they're a better or worse athlete. Somebody's they have long femurs versus a short torso. How does that apply to the logic? So I think as we grow our data sets and, again, democratize, allow people to have access to these things, we're going to have a much better world for all the stuff you guys are doing to help people get back into the playing field versus, you know, and I love hearing all four of you speak because you guys clearly care about the people you're working with, but I've been a coach at a lot of levels, and I've also had parents yelling at me to get a kid back on, and I don't have some supporting evidence. Or, you know, there's other coaches, I was sharing with Josh, I witnessed a quarterback on another team get a concussion. He took him like 20, 30 seconds to put his mouthpiece back in. I went back and I watched it on film, and their coach refused to pull the kid out of the game because there wasn't a model or something that was kind of also egging at him. So I think we have a lot of combination work as we progress our coaching ability that's going to take into data sets, take into science, and the fact that there's much more than just the gut instinct. And I'm not saying we don't trust, you know, veteran coaches who've done so much work, but it's also evolving and adapting. It's just like if we told somebody 10 years ago you could pay everything off of your phone, people would have said, no, I still want to write a check. But here we are, and it's just, you know, trying to educate as many of our staff across the board as soon as we can to help produce these data for all of our athletes.
I think in the future they're going to try to incorporate all three aspects together. In an earlier panel I had discussed or had mentioned about that. I think there's three elements when it comes to athlete. There's a performance aspect, there's the internal aspect, and there's a mental aspect. And like he mentioned, you know, there's a mechanical analysis that we have. We have lasers, we have force plates, we have camera systems, all this stuff. And you kind of predict or at least analyze it percentage-wise as far as an injury reduction or potential for injury type of thing. But even though the athlete may be at a low risk of injury, there may be an internal aspect of it that can increase his injury risk type thing. And then you have the mental aspect of it as well. I think in the future, hopefully, they'll be able to incorporate all three of them to try to kind of predict or at least anticipate a potential of injury.
I would say that going back to AI is kind of in its infancy or really past its infancy stage. I would kind of say more of its terrible twos. And for you guys that have kids, you know exactly what I mean, right? It's learning. It's a learning model, right? And as we continue in implementing AI within this industry and within these, I would say, scopes, it's continuing to learn these predictive models. So again, kind of reactive or switching from a reactive model of injury prevention or reduction into this injury prevention mode as we continue to learn different things from force angles, joint angles, so on and so forth is going to be very important. The next thing is really just, and again, that communication piece of the education of between, right, the different silos and breaking those silos down, right? And at the end of the day, right, there is an element, the human element of being an athlete as well, and understanding that more is going to be very important. Yeah, we can collect as much data as we want, we can have all these numbers, and really that tells a wonderful story of what's going on and with the athlete. And we are humans at the end of the day, and we want to go perform, and we want to go win, so that competitive element is a very important piece of it. And understanding how all those things kind of interact is going to be kind of the future when it comes to that. But like I mentioned, AI is newer to this market, and you're starting to see it kind of pop up, but as it continues to learn and as it continues to improve in its prediction models, I think that will be kind of the next big forward leap in injury reduction.
I think in the future, we become more concise with all this data. So like if you look at back 2017, 2018, when I first started in the NBA, it was just a lot of data and very overwhelming. Nowadays, these practitioners are becoming more concise and rolling out, I guess, the noise, you would say. Now introducing AI, we're changing the game again. So I think in the future, I don't know how long it's going to be, but at some point you can have like a digital twin where you can input this injury and input this type of rehab program, and then it's going to tell you how they're going to adapt. Something cool in the future, just my mind kind of going with it, but there's definitely a lot of possibilities with the AI right now.
Yeah, I think to those points, I'll add, the aggregation of all this data. I mean, one thing everybody's kind of talked about is, there's so many different tools and technologies and modalities, and there's no one thing that is going to solve the injury problem, right? There's no one thing that's going to prevent or reduce an injury, but being able to take a lot of these different data points across the board and aggregate them to allow the practitioners to have a better window to look through with their athletes, to then be able to do something from a preventative side, using the predictive analytics, showing an athlete's susceptibility for X, Y, or Z is going to allow practitioners to then make a proactive, come up with a proactive solution to that as opposed to just being reactive after the fact.
Yeah, so good point. So last question I want to ask you guys is, with all these technologies, right, how do you balance the human's intuition, coaches, practitioners, right? When you have all these data, because you don't want to undermine the coaches, the trainers, right? How do you find the balance between what the data is telling you and what you see or what you think that the real cause of potential injury is?
I think it was brought up earlier on this panel, but most of the time, the data that we can collect and analyze confirms what good practitioners already see. In my experience, it's 95% of the time, whatever we're seeing from our technology kind of reinforces what our eyes are seeing. 5% of the time, it doesn't, and then that's when you take a second look and you kind of go down the rabbit hole and you find out why you're seeing something different in the data or the information than what your eyes are telling you. But again, it goes to that collaboration and communication piece. There's not a single person on my team, whether it's the strength coach, the athletic trainer, the physical therapist, etc., that is going to come up with the same conclusion. It's about using that data collectively to tell a better story, to have better communication within our group, to come up with a more informed decision about what we're going to do moving forward.
So on that point, has there been cases where the data was telling you was disdiagnostic, but you thought in the end that was not the case? Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, there's a 5% of the time where X, Y, or Z shows up on a force plate or wearable technology or whatever the modality might be. But again, that's the importance of interdepartmental communication, because we all have a different lens and different perspective. And so what I might see with my background as a strength and conditioning coach might be slightly different than what somebody else sees with their background as a physical therapist. And so it's having those conversations around that data. Why are we seeing something different when we're both looking at the same information? Again, there's no perfect solution, but that's where we want to go to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just the whole purpose of the data is to basically be a second opinion to confirm or deny what you're already thinking. Sometimes it's good to actually be wrong and then have the data convince you potentially that to change your mind. But then that's like what you were saying as far as having those communications, conversations in order to come together and find the right solution for a certain issue. We were just talking about previous panel with about Cam Scatterville, running back. Of course, everyone knows he's going to lead with his head. The data is going to tell us he's at risk for injury, but guess what? He's scoring touchdowns and he's helping his team win. So you just got to use like the human knowledge, human sense of like, this is sports. If you don't want to get hurt, don't play sports, basically.
I agree to that. I would say this too, the human element's very important. There's so many different modalities that are currently out there, whether it be counter movement jumps, blood tests, isometric tests, etc., etc. And really those things, while they are wonderful and while they give a good insight as to what's going on, they really write the words of the book. We still have to read the book in order to understand the story, right? And that's what's important, and that's why you guys have the intelligence, the knowledge, and the know-how to go out there and go do that, right? So you have to read what that data gets, interpret it in your method, and then be able to translate that back so you can make those informed decisions. You can never, take that away from the human element, and that's what's important at the end of the day. And going back to the communication piece, right? We're all in it for the same purpose, and that's to win games, and that's to be successful, and that's to help prevent injuries. Whether that's, you're working with your athletes, or you're in the weight room, or you're in the AT room, or whatever it might be, right? Being an athlete is being an athlete, and athletics is athletics. And You know, the human element is very important. So data, while it's good, won't replace what you guys have in your knowledge and expertise.
Just kind of going along with what everybody was saying, and I think I mentioned this earlier also, is that the data that we collect is just to basically validate or help us pivot as far as what we're doing. And you know, the question that Julien asked is, what if you get the data and the data is wrong, or you're seeing something else? You know, when you look at the whole athlete, whether the performance, internal, the mental aspect of it, the way I often look at it is I look at it as an onion, right? An onion, there's different layers in the onion. So if you do a data analysis and you just stick with one specific, for let's say force plate testing, that's what you're driving to, and the numbers, the data isn't validating what you're doing, you have to peel the onion and kind of go into different aspects. Now you look into the internal aspect, what's going on with the athlete, the internal aspect. The athlete may not be sleeping well. He's been having sleeping issues for the last 2 weeks. And you have a program that you've designed and somehow he's not producing the result that you expected. The data is telling me that, hey, he's failing, he's regressing. It must be my program. I got to switch program, but there's something else kind of going on in that part. So again, at the end of the day, we mentioned data is just as help us validate what we're doing, regress, or actually allow us to peel the onion and dive more into the athlete as far as what's going on.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of quadruple down on that, right? The data should be kind of it should be collaborative in how we work and not combative. And by that, it should be for our angle, and I think, you know, you'll hear different things, but for our standpoint, it's always been about helping to unlock you guys' superpowers. And I say this like really as a person who's coming from a coaching lens. I want data and I want analysis and information that allows me to help identify problems faster. And going to what Stefan said, right? There's a time element. And if I can identify things in a quicker time frame, then we can make adjustments, we can make we can speed up recovery, we can do all sorts of stuff. I think of the surgery Jason Tatum just had in the spring, right? Where he had it within hours after the game, and we can see the progress versus if he waited a week, and we have so much data sets on people who've had to wait weeks and months to get that same surgery, and how much longer the recovery time is. And again, it's a collaborative, not combative. It shouldn't be a friction point. It should be, there's humans involved. And usually younger humans, right, like 30 and under, who are mostly in these situations. And so we have to treat that with a certain amount of, again, respect and dignity in looking at them. I think, and I'll give a personal example there as well. I have a 14-year-old daughter, but last year, when she was 13, she got a pretty nasty concussion in a basketball game. And we're lucky, we live near Johns Hopkins. We went over there and we started getting the concussion protocol checked. And they had a new system out with Garmin. And they were running this case study. She had to wear a Garmin watch for a year. And they've actually done a longitudinal study. And so historically, I would have thought, oh, you know, like 2-3 weeks, she's fine. But it actually, from the data sets they were gathering and doing extensive testing and even home testing through a laptop and stuff, and combining it, they actually made a decision. It actually took over like 6 weeks to actually let her, as an 8th grade student, be like fully back at capacity. And I think about that again as we're making stronger decisions based on information versus, for anybody else who's old enough to remember when Paul Correa played and in the Stanley Cup Finals when Scott Stevens essentially killed him on the ice and he was laying unconscious for minutes. There's zero chance in the world we would ever let a player like that or an athlete like that come back on the ice. I couldn't imagine that now. Or he comes back and scores 2 goals, he's a hero, it's legendary, but there's zero chance that he remembers any of that, and I don't think us thinking long term, and again, we're making better decisions because we have more information, not replacing the people who are making the decisions. And go back to what I said, just unlocking the superpowers of coaches, trainers, strength and conditioning coaching of, hey, here's all the stuff we're helping identify you with tech. That gives you guys more fun stuff of actually helping an athlete get better versus spending all your time watching film to see where those injuries occurred or what happened or how they're tweaking it. If we can accelerate that program from the tech side, that's going to let you guys do the stuff you love to do, which is help athletes get better.
All right, so we got 2 minutes left. So anybody want to ask any questions? Anybody? Yeah, hold on a second.
I'm thinking about how you guys at your professions, especially NHL, NBA, a lot of games. How do you guys stay proactive when many of these games, like the volume and the intensity spikes, right? More games in the season, and even the game of play is a lot faster, and fast breaks are like, you know, all-time highs. So like the intensity is going up, the amount of games are being thrown in, right? In-season tournaments, college football, more games. So how we can train the best and have everybody on the same page and get data. How do we keep pace or stay proactive when intensity and volume is going up? And I know there's some things like load management and stuff like that, but just curious on what you guys think on how do we stay on top of that from what you've seen.
Yeah, I'll just very briefly. So in the NHL this year, without question, volume intensity is going up, in part because this is an Olympic year for us. So we lose 3 weeks of the season, but we don't cut any games, and we have to get them all in the same amount of time. So we have 3 times this season, only 3 times with more than 2 days between a game. So we're swimming against the tide, to be honest, but for us, we're really trying to prioritize rest and recovery and find opportunities for recuperation, essentially, which has been different in our organization in the last few years, where we've been very developmentally minded. So we're really sort of flipping things 180 degrees and trying to find as many opportunities, you know, whether that's staying over an extra night before we travel, utilizing, you know, cold tub sauna, you know, Nordic spa type places in towns that we're in, creative solutions like that, but we're trying to find ways to recover. That's what we're doing.
I'll jump in from the other side. I think you're seeing it in the basketball world already hit with the amount of intensity in games in youth sports. So I don't know how many people have been at basketball tournaments of late, but on those weekend tournaments, you have kids who are playing 6 to 8 games in a weekend with no recovery, no plan. They may have a great AAU coach. You may have a coach who has zero concept of player recovery or nutrition and is just running them out there. And what we've seen, of course, over the last 5-6 years in the basketball world is you're seeing an increase in ACL injuries. You're seeing an increase in those college athletes falling apart. Higher risk of injury. We're seeing a huge uptick of girls who are already at risk for ACL, but having much more NCAA college women having those injuries. So I think, unfortunately, we're not at that tipping point where we're going to have to like regress and, to what I was saying, like have that data set or information that kind of guides us from youth all the way up to that point, because there's also a cumulative effect on that. And, you know, in the hockey world, the amount of hits they're taking, all that we saw with the UNC testing with the helmets, the amount of impact continuously. I think hopefully we start having better decisions so that we're not hitting those points.
Yeah, I think it's we don't have any more time for more questions, but I want to thank the speakers on the panel, so thank you.